have a new conspiracy, guys. It involves the identity of a certain skeleton that loves knocking around the old funny bone. Drumroll, please. That's right, Sans is none other than Big Skeleton from the 1992 Welsh cartoon, Funny Bones.
But where is your concrete evidence?
Concrete evidence? This is a YouTube video. Just believe everything I say or my fans will attack you.
Oh, well, okay.
None.
Okay, so maybe we don't know the actual identity of our skeletal quipster. Unless, of course, his identity is none other than Sans the Skeleton. But what we do know is that there are some deep psychological problems or issues deep within the mind of this character. Namely, his depression. But in order to understand what exactly comes into play for Sans's character, we have to know what depression entails. So what is depression? Many people assume it just means being sad all the time, and while that may be a part of it, it is by far not the only piece of the puzzle. Taken directly from the National Institute of Mental Health, major depression is defined as severe symptoms of depression that interfere with your ability to work, sleep, study, eat, and enjoy life, which is a straightforward meaning. Now let's look at the symptoms. Persistent, sad, anxious, or empty feelings. Feelings of hopelessness or pessimism. Feelings of guilt, worthlessness, or helplessness. Irritability, restlessness. Loss of interest in activities or hobbies once pleasurable. Fatigue and decreased energy. Difficulty concentrating, remembering details, and making decisions. Insomnia, early morning wakefulness, or excessive sleeping. Overeating or appetite loss. Thoughts of suicide, suicide attempts, aches and pains, headaches, cramps, or digestive problems that do not ease, even with treatment. And some of us know these symptoms all too well. Though being a skeleton, digestive problems would be an interesting case. It's easy to see how these all fit into the way Sans reacts to decisions in the story. Sans is shown having a huge feeling of futility and hopelessness. His dialogue, especially in the genocide run, shows just how he feels things have been all for nothing. You can't understand how this feels, knowing that one day, without any warning, it's all going to be reset. Look, I gave up trying to go back a long time ago, and getting to the surface doesn't really appeal to me anymore either. 'Cause even if we do, we'll just end up right back here, without any memory of it, right? To be blunt, it makes it kind of hard to give it my all. Or is that just a poor excuse for being lazy? Hell if I know. And now I know you're all saying, well, we already knew that. And yes, that's because this is the most pertinent point of our Peksky Punster. But there are more clues to his depression. Such as him falling asleep while on his job, but even more so, falling asleep during the fight with him. While it could be argued that it's the fight wearing him down to exhaustion, he's certainly not working his fingers to the bone. Simplified, this could be caused by a number of reasons. But, as we know, depression can cause intense insomnia, which, in turn, turns into fatigue. And with insomnia and fatigue, you try to sleep whenever your body lets you. You can be tossing and turning all night, unable to get a wink. And then, middle of the day, you can take a nap. Sans finds sleep whenever he is able to, but because he's constantly on and off and on and off, he feels so fatigued that he just can't keep up with everyday activity. And those are just a broad stroke of things that could affect someone with major depression. The Sleep Foundation actually outlines many variants on each of these issues and adds a few lesser considered ones. But now it is also heavily implied that Sans has guilt over something. Perhaps the incident with Gaster. It is the dialogue of the Lost Soul version of Sans that hammers it home, though. You'll never see him again. It could also be that Sans is one of the very few people who seems to be able to see all of the timelines and game resets. Maybe this is why he has feelings of futility. and why he just sits by while the genocidal path takes place. And all the while, this gives him a feeling of guilt. But we'll get right back to this later. For now, though, let's look at another aspect of Sans' personality. His affinity for comedy. Sans wants to make people laugh and enjoy the life or lives that he can't. Humor has been well known as a shield against harsh realities. In fact, the term gallows humor describes just that. Sans is using something that we, as humans, use to deal with harsh anxiety. Sans' very design is even used to reflect his emotional state. His face, while wearing a skeletal grin, also resembles a mask. A mask to hide his true feelings. We all wear metaphorical masks from time to time, and Sans is no different. Also, notably, he wears the color blue, which is a color often used, as many people know, as a means of expressing sadness, depression. You feel the blues. And finally, even his undead appearance could speak to his feeling of despair as well, since often, death is used as an emotional metaphor for depression. More tangibly, it represents a person that wants to be dead, but is still just shambling around, living life like a zombie. Morbid as it is, some people go through with that. But before we get any deeper into that, let's look at the importance of Sans' relationship with his brother, Papyrus. To us, it seems Papyrus is an oblivious failure at catching humans, who also happens to be obsessed with spaghetti.
Lots of spaghetti!
And while there is much more to his character than that, the real importance is that he is Sans' anchor. Papyrus is the reason Sans is sticking around, because he cares so much for his brother that he can't completely detach from his life. Papyrus is the glue that binds Sans to the path he's on, and one of the reasons he looks at his situation the way he does. Another important character in understanding Sans is Toriel. She presents a similar anchor weight, as she and Sans are in a deep bond. So much so that he attempts to keep a promise for her. This is important because Sans typically is not the type to keep promises. While Papyrus is the strongest bond for Sans, Toriel is another string attaching him to the protagonistic ideals he holds. Ah, but it doesn't end with clinical psychology now, does it? No. There are plenty of philosophical ideas at play as well. It has been suggested by many sources that Sans is philosophically in line with nihilism. And while partly true, there is a more specific word we could be using here. Determinism. Ah, there's that ever-important word again. Determined pops up again and again throughout Undertale in a fashion. Determinism could best be described as the universe. From birth, it is put on a track and moves ever onward, ever advancing, ever expanding. And now, what could be considered a universal birth in a video game? A reset. When the game tells you that you are filled with determination, it is not a hope of making it through the trials of the game itself, but instead it is telling you that you are filled with the determination to continue on the path you chose in the very beginning, that being neutral, pacifist, or genocide. So, how does this apply to Sans and his depression and apathy? Well, because he's fighting against a philosophy that says nothing he does matters. This ultimately leads him to decide that it's not worth it to try and stop you from a neutral run, so he just stands by and judges you instead. Even then, he's shown to be fighting against his deterministic side, as being a true deterministic nihilist would suggest that morals are just as pointless as the lives that lead them. But ultimately, he succumbs to just letting whatever happens, happen. With the exception of the genocide route, in which he states, "All I know is, seeing what comes next, I can't afford not to care anymore." Again, More evidence that he is in a constant struggle with a deterministic view. Every possible timeline has and is happening, and he's seen them all. So he has no choice but to be a determinist. It's almost as if Toby Fox, this game's creator, designed the game as the story of Sans coming to terms with his own futility. And perhaps that is why we can all relate to, and thus love, Sans the skeleton. We can all fall into periods of, what's the point? Or, I don't care. And while many of these wonderful characters in the Undertale world represent various attributes of the human condition, Sans hits the hardest. Depression, apathy, futility, and a constant struggle between giving up or standing up. But on the side of the true pacifist run, we get a new ending. This ending suggests that even Sans has the hope to be happy. Which means we do too. We don't know our future. We don't know our infinite other timelines. It's all in the dark to us, but that's okay. Because if we stay determined, then we can get the endings we're after. You don't have to have a bad time.